Picking up where we left off. The bear carried a horrible stench, a foul combination of wet dog and rotten meat, a filthy hamster cage and musk and musty decay. Only 10 times worse, Anne says. She told herself she had to quit fighting and play dead, so she rolled onto her stomach. The bear grabbed her arm, rolled her back over, and let go. Anne rolled onto her stomach again, and the bear sank its teeth first into one side of her torso and then into the other. Anne's backpack deflected some of the damage, but the bites were still hard, the jagged teeth punching holes and making bruises. Ugh. The bear used its claws, the tools that can rip apart a tree trunk, dig up a ground squirrel, or shatter the ribs on a bull elk. She scalped me with her paw, one swipe of her paw. The wound began at her left temple, no more than an inch from her eye. The claws raked across the top of her head, almost all the way to her right ear, severing her scalp from her skull, from the brow back. Anne was screaming throughout the attack, even while she thought she was playing dead. At some point, she realized she had to quit screaming if she wanted the bear to think she was dead. Anne laughs when she tells that part of the story. So silly, but she wasn't laughing then. She thought her life was over. But Christine wasn't out of the fight yet. The bear was chewing on her arm and had swatted her on the head, Christine says. In my mind, neither of us had anything to lose. I thought we were both goners, and that's when I found myself kicking it in the head. I think I kicked so hard that I landed on my back. So the bear started chewing on Christine again. It bit down hard on her lower left leg, but she kept kicking, fighting back. Finally, she curled up her leg and kicked straight out as hard and as fast as she could, the bottom of her hiking boot catching the bear on the end of the snout. That got the bear's attention, made it hop to the side and quit trying to immobilize the fast, strong legs. Then it sank its teeth into Christine one last time, biting the side of her hip. It didn't shake its head, it didn't chew, it didn't rip away the flesh. It just bit once, released, and ran away. Much more quickly than it had begun, the attack was over. The bear was gone. After a moment, Christine rose and came to Anne just a few paces away. "Are you okay?" she asked. "How bad is it?" Anne didn't know where the bear had gone and was concentrating on playing dead. She tried to explain to Christine, but it came out all wrong. "I'm dead," she said. "I'm dead." She laughs now about that part of the story, too. Anne Quarterman laughs at her own mistakes quite a bit. It's hard to say how long the attack lasted, a minute or two perhaps, maybe more, probably less. That's a long time as bear attacks go. They usually start and finish in a flash. The attack also was unusual in that it gave the women plenty of time to prepare for it. They saw the bear coming from 300 meters away. I gotta bring that up later. They saw the bear coming from 300 meters away. They had time to move 50 meters. They had time to get the bear spray out, get it ready, and use it. They did everything they could to avoid the attack, but the bear kept coming. They weren't armed. We'll discuss that later. They have often puzzled over why. So have others, like myself. Why weren't you armed? We all stood there and wondered why a bear charged from that sort of distance, says J.P. Coors, a bear management specialist for Parks Canada. It's like the weather. It's hard to predict. Clearly, unless the women vastly misjudged the distance when they first saw the bear, it was not a surprise encounter. The bear almost certainly saw them first, ignored their attempts to defuse the situation, and came after them with an attitude. It was a poor year for natural foods, and the bears were hyperphagic. And a black bear had been seen in the same area a few days before. Perhaps the grizzly had been defending the defending its meager food sources from the black bear, and treated the two women as the same type of interloper competition. Perhaps the bear had bad eyesight. Maybe it had a carcass stashed nearby. Maybe she was just naturally an aggressive bear, Anne says. We really don't know for sure. I don't believe she wanted to kill us, because if she had, we would not be here today. She was telling us to get out of her territory, which we did gladly. Christine agrees. She just wanted to turn us around. Getting away was no easy job. Both women were badly hurt. Anne's head was bleeding hard. So was her right arm. Christine's arm and hip were bleeding badly, and both women were bruised and battered and torn. It was raining. They needed help, and there was nobody around but them. Anne wrapped a shirt around her head to staunch the bleeding, pulled the first aid kit from her pack, and bandaged the worst of their wounds. They felt no pain, that would come later, and argued briefly about which way to go. Probably dealing with a lot of shock as well. Shock's good for hiding the pain. They were about halfway between Anne's truck and the chalet, but the chalet was uphill, and getting there meant crossing a glacier in bad weather. Once there, a helicopter would have to be summoned to take them to a hospital. Walking back to the truck seemed a simple, logical choice, but there was a big problem with that option. The bear had gone in that direction. After the attack, the bear had run downhill, meaning that somewhere between the two women and their best source of help was a mother grizzly with an attitude, with the taste of their blood in its mouth. That was our big fear, that the bear was down the creek and waiting, Anne says. Or that another bear would be there, Christine adds. There were almost definitely other bears around, all of them likely to be hungry and crabby. That was not the only grizzly in that valley, says Coors. I can say that pretty much unequivocally. It's not a huge area, and we have known there to be up to 8 grizzlies in there at one time. But they started walking toward the truck anyway. It made the most sense. Each had an arm in a sling, and the stench of the bear traveled with them. It permeated their clothes and skin and hair. They would smell it for weeks whenever they used that clothing. The women shouted out. They sang the A&W Root Beer theme song. Well, that'd piss off a bear. They talked about the symptoms of shock. They vowed never to go to the backcountry again. Now they're talking. Then they changed their minds. They vowed to live forever and do whatever they wanted, wherever they wanted. They talked and talked. Sometimes they wondered if they would make it. Anne fell once hard, and the bandage slipped from her head. She asked Christine to pass her love to her sister. Most of the trail was downhill, but there were a few little rises and uphill stretches that were brutal. They wondered what they should do if one of them collapsed and could go no further. They would spend the night together, they decided. Nobody would spend the night on the mountain alone. Nobody would be abandoned here. This is terrible. This woman came after that bear when it was attacking me, Christine says of Anne. And Christine did the same thing for Anne. Armed only with her size 7 shoes, the knowledge that her legs were the strongest part of her. Armed only with that. We decided to stick together. It took 3 hours, but the women made it. Reaching the truck was a milestone, but it wasn't the end of the road. Anne bent to lock the hubs on her truck and engage the 4-wheel drive for the treacherous drive out. She was wearing a raincoat. Blood had pooled on the sleeve. Bending over sent a torrent of blood gushing to the ground. She had been hurt and bleeding for a long time, probably in shock. Now she freaked out. A big puddle of blood spelled out how serious things had become. It was 3 hours after the attack, and she was still bleeding hard. 5 miles of soggy dirt road lay ahead of them. The truck had a stick shift, which means you need 2 hands to drive it, and that is something neither woman had at the time. So they tackled the job together. Christine operated the steering wheel and the pedals, when she pressed the clutch with her mangled left leg and used her left arm, the good one, to shift the gears. Amen. The Woolsey Creek Road is an unforgiving one. On the uphill side, a little drainage ditch separates the road from the mountain. This is good erosion control, but it makes an easy place to get stuck if you drift into it. On the downhill side, there is thick timber growing on the almost sheer face. Check something here. Okay. If you went off the road here, a tree probably would stop you before you hit the creek 200 feet below. But that is little comfort when you gaze over the edge, still bleeding, knowing you need help and need it soon. There is very little room for error on this road. There are switchbacks and hairpin curves, places where you have to stop and back up to make it around the corner. There are places where the shoulder has crumbled away. Let's hold it there and I'll make another video. Love you, God bless.